Please give a warm RHPL welcome to Rufus McGaugh.
Thank you very much. I said to my wife before I left tonight, on a horrible night like this, anybody that shows up to listen to me is going to become my new bestest friend in the world. We're going to be put in a lunatic asylum, one or the other, on that. So I can't thank you enough for showing up on this horrible night. There's no doubt in my mind why I was invited here tonight. And can everybody hear me okay? Okay. I hate these things, but they said I got to use it, so I'm going to use it. No doubt in my mind why I was invited. And two wonderful things happened to me about a year and a half ago. Number one, I finally did it. I finally got to every single country in the world. Although, as I often joke, it only took me 49 and a half years to do it, but I did it. And then my book came out, as mentioned, Longitude and Latitude with Attitude, One Man's Quest to See the Entire World. And it's quite a story, and all the photographs in there is all my photography and so forth. And the very last country that I did turned out to be, among many dangerous countries in the world, Libya. All of us who know anything about Libya know that it's racked with civil war, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, tribal fighting, and so forth. And that was the last one for me that finally sealed the deal. A couple funny things about it, though. The first thing is that I had done every country in the world except Libya about in 2015 or 2016. So I went about a year and a half there where it just wasn't working to get into Libya there because of the violence and the fighting and the terrorism and everything. Well, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm not getting any younger, and I didn't know how things were going to work out or whatever, and I have to share with you a traveler's nightmare. And the traveler's nightmare, as time kept going, and I wasn't getting into Libya, was that I would do every country in the world except Libya. I'd kick the bucket, they'd bury me, and the tombstone would say, he'd been to every country but Libya. For a traveler, what a horrible thing to have over your body or your head or whatever, but it happened. How did I get into Libya? That's also something of a humorous story. With the state buyout 9 years ago, I very reluctantly took retirement in the Grosse Pointe public school system. And I call it so-called retirement because they have me back in the school system all the time, putting on slide presentations, big surprise there, and doing a little teaching there. So this was only a short time ago. I had gone back to my old school because I could do all the schools now. That's back at Brownell Middle School where I'd spent most of my career. And I had put on a slide presentation for the 6th grade students, not in social studies as I usually do because that's a good fit, but for all the English classes. They were reading a fictional novel called Peak about a boy about their age who climbs Mount Everest. And I had just climbed to base, and they had me in doing a slide presentation for that. So I do my presentation at my old school. I get home after school. A few hours later, early evening, I get to my computer, and I get an email with a very strange, unusual name that I didn't recognize. And I open it up, and it was 4 or 5 sentences. Let me share those 4 or 5 sentences with you. It was very cryptic. And it went something like this. Rufus, my daughter had you for the slide presentation today and enjoyed it very much. Sentence 1. Sentence 2. She said you told the class that you had been to every country but Libya. Sentence 2. Sentence 3. I can get you into Libya. I immediately emailed back and said, yeah, but can you get me back out? I've done a lot of traveling, and back in the days, and some of you that are travelers know that the getting in isn't always the hard part, it's the getting out. Well, he was able to do that for me, and I was able to seal the deal. As I mentioned, I spent almost 50 years in education, teaching primarily in Grosse Pointe. And 9 years ago, when I very reluctantly went into so-called retirement, I started looking at the list to do. Prior to that, in my classroom, and kids have followed this for years, some of my oldest students, believe it or not, are 51, 52. But as they walked into the classroom, right on my chalkboard or blackboard there, I had a list of all the countries that I had been to. And they would, before the bell rang, look at it, talk about places they wanted to go, places they had been to, or ask me some question about. And of course, as the years went on, the list got longer and longer. But when I went into so-called retirement, I said, you know what, I need a new list now. I don't have a classroom per se anymore. I need a list of the countries that I need to do if I'm ever going to do this. And believe me, there's nobody more in the world surprised that I made this accomplishment than me. Most of my life, I just thought it was never going to happen for a variety of reasons. This would have been 9 years ago, and at that time I had, I forget exactly, but 41, 42, 43 more countries to go. And, you know, the light bulb went off. I said, you know, this might be doable. You know, I got a little more time now, and I might be able to do it. So what I did is, with the countries that I had not been to, I divided them into 3 lists. And I'll start with list 1. List 1 were countries or areas or someplace I wanted to go that would be very physically demanding. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm not getting any younger anymore. So there were only really 2 on that one. Number 1 was Antarctica. And, you know, what's so tough about Antarctica? Well, let me tell you what's so tough about Antarctica. One day when I was down there, it was 74 degrees below zero. That's what's tough about Antarctica. And I'm a guy that would prefer Jamaica or Puerto Rico, okay? So that was tough. The second one I had on there, that although I had already been in Nepal, in fact, a couple times, and had done a lot of mountain climbing in other countries, somehow, usually when we think of mountain climbing and mountain trekking, we often think of Nepal and certainly Mount Everest. I had never done one there. My vacations always coincided with their rainy season, so it just had not happened. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do a mountain trek. I've done mountain treks all over the Himalayas, the Rockies, and whatever. I'm going to do one in Nepal. And as I started looking at all the wonderful mountains and treks that you could do, you know, the one that, you know, just I couldn't get away from was the big one, you know, Mount Everest. And I wasn't planning on going to the top. I don't have that kind of time or money. If I ever went home and told my wife I'm going to be on a 3-month expedition away from home, I'll be sleeping on your couch down in the basement. So that wasn't going to happen. But I could at least maybe get to base, in which I did. So I got that done. That was the first 2 things I wanted to do. The next list were those countries that, if you put it in a nice way, were politically unstable. A better word might be dangerous, where you're going to get yourself killed, quite frankly. And unfortunately, that was a much longer list. I'll just read them off quickly here. Those countries would include Burundi, Iraq, Chad, Cuba, North Korea, Somalia, and Libya. Each and every one of those countries I knew was going to be very, very difficult to get into, to try to travel around, and even more important, to stay alive when I was there. So let me just give you a little 1 or 2 sentence summary about the difficulties of each of those countries, some of those that a lot of you might not be familiar with. Burundi. That's a little tiny country in Central Africa, right near Uganda. And what was so tough about that is the fact that once I got there, this is a country that the police state, in my opinion, is worse than North Korea. So that was a tough one, okay. Iraq. Well, I went there in 2012, so the war was still going on. I guess I don't need to say anything more about that, but that was a dicey one to get in when there was a war going on. Chad, a little more humorous though. First of all, what was the problem of getting into Chad? Chad is a country in north central Africa, right below Libya. Now, Chad is probably the least visited country in Africa. Hardly anybody knows anything about Chad. Most of my teaching career, I taught 7th grade Africa and Asia. And when we would get to Chad, of course, I had read up on it or whatever, but to be honest with you, I just didn't know a whole lot about it like everybody else. And then finally, this would have been probably in the 1980s, a New York Times reporter did something that was unheard of. He got a visa to get into Chad, and then for the next week, typical of the New York Times, they ran an article from this reporter every single day for a week in that tiny little print that the New York Times is noted for. So I would read it, and then the next day go into class and share what I thought was interesting or good or odd or unusual. I find most 7th graders share my odd sense of humor, and that was one of the things I wanted to share with them. Now, Chad is a big country by world standards. I mean, it's as big as Texas or California. It makes it like one of the top 20, 25 countries in the world. And the reporter that went there reported that here's this huge country of the size of Texas or California, and they had one single traffic light in the entire country, and it had not worked since 1967. Okay, so this is a country that's not doing real well. My students, because they share my same humor, immediately the hands start popping up and they're going, Rufus, if you ever get in there, you're going to take a look and get a picture of that traffic light, right? I said, you know it, man. I gotta see that. So when I did get into Chad, now that I've been there, I can share it with you. I've got good news and I've got bad news about Chad and that traffic light. The good news, I guess, is that, hey, since we read that in the 1980s, even poor Chad has moved up in the world a bit. It's doing a bit better. And when I did get into Chad, they now have more than one traffic light. The bad news is none of them work either. Okay, so it's not doing much better than it was doing in the 1980s. When I got into Chad, this is a country few people go to. The only tour company that they have in that entire country is run by an Italian guy. And when I got into his van, the man broke my heart because I am out for records and stuff like that. And I said, am I your first American in the last 25 years? And he said, no, there's 5 that beat you, which I wasn't happy about, but it is what it is, and still isn't doing too bad. But anyway, I had 5 beat me. 3 of them were a National Geographic team that had come there. My students were always trying to help me out. They say, well, count them as 1. I said, no, we'll make it 5, you know. I said, you know, it is what it is on that. So anyway, when he asked me, he says, what do you expect to see in Chad? I said, well, you know, what I'd like to do is get the tribal thing, the cultural thing, the geography. I knew there wouldn't be much history or whatever. So we get out on Lake Chad, which is a huge lake, and we get out there and we are going deep, deep into Africa. We're on a little boat with a big old motor on it. It's hot as blazes, like you can't believe. We're all suffering, even the native who's running the boat or whatever. And we get to an area, and finally, I'm up front. My Italian guide's in the back, and he yells up to me, and he says, Rufus, this is as far as National Geographic got. Is this good enough? And you just know where I'm going to go, and I'm going like this. If I can't beat them here, I'm going to go further in what they did. So that's what I did in Chad. Cuba. Well, you're going to enjoy this story. Me, not so much. You'll see why in a minute when I tell it to you. But it might say a lot about my personality. Not all good, by the way. But here's what happened. As you know, it's difficult for the most part to get into Cuba. It was starting to open up a little bit under Obama. Now Trump has pushed it back a little bit more where it's more difficult to get in. You can go in, usually if you go with a university or a museum group or whatever, and when I read their itinerary or whatever, it sounded kind of boring to me, okay? I want to do something a little better than that. So I talked my brother-in-law into going with me. I said, how about we do this? I said, why don't we go to Cuba and ride our bikes from one end of the island to the other? I do a lot of biking. I do a lot of mountain climbing. I do a lot of mountain trekking. I don't know if you're familiar with the Michigander bike ride. That's a 300-mile bike ride across Michigan every year. I've done 14 of those. So he's all in. We're going to do it. And we get over there, and it's pretty good, except it's hot as blazes. Every day was over 92. And in the first couple bike rides we did, it was up mountains, so it was a pretty tough trip. And I was with a small group, mostly Canadians, because they can get in. That's no problem for them. And this trip has turned out to be a pretty good trip. I'm seeing what I want to see in Cuba instead of being with some boring, museum tour or whatever. And so anyway, it's the second to the last day. And we're riding our bikes, and once again, it's mountains. I don't know if you ever rode a bike up a mountain, but trust me, as a guy who rides bikes all the time, it is not fun. But anyway, we get up the mountain, and now the easy part's coming. Now we start to go down the mountain. I guess I don't have to tell you that Cuba's not in good economic shape, and the roads are not in very good shape. And my riding companion, ironically enough, that day was a Canadian doctor. Anyway, we're going down, and we're going at a pretty good clip because we're going downhill. We're going to make use of the gravity, and she hits a pothole. And she crashes right in front of me. And I go over her, and I go flying up into the air, and I come down, and I hit the pavement, and I break my elbow, and I sever the humerus bone that goes up to it on it. I go flying back up. I hit the pavement again. I break my left wrist. So technically, I've got 2 broken arms, but I'm not done yet. And I go back up, and I hit again. I get a concussion. I break a finger. This might say something about my personality. I stood up, I shook my head twice, And I got on my bike, and I finished that bike ride and went all the way to the end of it at 13 more kilometers, and I finished it. That probably, I'll blame it on the Marines, which I was in for 2 years. And a spoiler alert here, I hated every second I was in the military and the Marines. But anyway, I did pick up a few things from them. One of the things was, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Many, many years before this Cuba trip, when I was a young man in the Marines, we went in on a rescue mission for a 5-man Marine Con unit that was on the verge of getting wiped out. And the lead chopper, as it was going in to rescue these guys, was shot up very severely. 3 Marines were wounded. The worst part of the news was I was one of them. At any rate, we got off and we rescued those guys, so I never regret that whatsoever. We fought. We defeated the Viet Cong that day, and then they eventually sent in a medevac chopper for me and got me to a hospital. Well, while I was laying on the gurney with 2 doctors working on me, stopping the bleeding and patching me up and doing other various things, the Navy corpsman, because I had shot up my whole left side and the right side of my face. Don't worry about the face, it was never much to look at anyway. But anyway, as they were working on me, the Navy corpsman kept kind of looking at me strangely or weirdly or whatever. And I was in a lot of pain, I really didn't care. But finally, he couldn't hold it back anymore, and he goes, "Weren't you on the same chopper that those other 2 Marines were shot up on?" I go, "Yeah." He said, "Why didn't you just stay on a chopper like they did?" Here's me. It never occurred to me. So as you can clearly see, I'm never going to win any awards for being the best looking guy. My teachers will tell you I'm certainly not the smartest guy, but if you're looking for somebody focused, that's probably the guy that you want would be me there. Okay, North Korea. I can make this one short. Any weird thing you've seen or heard about North Korea in the newspaper or the TV, it's absolutely correct. I mean, I just can't add anything more to it. It was just a very strange and bizarre trip. I narrate it quite well and have some unique photos in there in the book. Somalia, as we get towards the list of the bad ones here. Once again, this will be a story you enjoy more than I do. This was one of the first of the dangerous ones that I did when I went into so-called retirement. When I go back to the schools now and I'm teaching to the kids or whatever, I always joke with them, and I used to do it when I was a full-time teacher, that I'm the only American that people don't say hi or hello to me. Instead, especially in my community, Grosse Pointe, they say, "Where have you been?" or "Where are you going?" Okay, that's just the way people greet me because they know I do all this traveling and everything. And so I go back to my old school, Brownell Middle School there, and sure enough, my colleagues are still saying, "Hi, Rufus, I haven't seen you in a while," or whatever. It's like, "Hey, where are you going?" or "Where did you just get back from?" or whatever. And I said, "Well, I'm going to go to Somalia." Well, there was a stunned silence because when we think of Somalia, we think of everything bad, Libya plus, if you would. Terrorism, gangs, rivals, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. We think of the pirates even. The worst part, of course, very sad, is I think most of us are familiar with Black Hawk Down, whether you read the book or the movie. Not only killing our American soldiers, but dragging their dead bodies through the streets and everything. And here, this is where I go for a vacation. Well, of course, it was the women teachers that piled in me right off the bat. They're going, "Hey, look at Bucko, you know, you're not in the Marines anymore. You got a family or whatever." I got married late. I still got 2 kids at home. They're going like, you can't be doing this stupid stuff. I said, "Look it, as I always joke with you guys, I'm not as dumb as I look." I said, "I got this all figured out." And hey, you know, I probably have because I've done the whole thing. I said, "Here's what I'm doing." I said, "I'm not going anywhere near Mogadishu." I said, "I'm flying into the northern breakaway part called Somaliland. It's very safe. I'd researched it. I checked it out. It was." I said, "No problem." They weren't quite buying it, but they let off. We moved on to other things. So I get into Somaliland. And just like I had swore on, my wife made me swear on a couple Bibles that, you know, I wasn't going to get myself killed. She could care less, but for the 2 boys anyway. But anyway, it was good. We were good to go. So it's time for me to leave Somaliland. I get on this old Russian Aeroflot airplane to fly down to Nairobi, Kenya. If you get a mental map going of Africa, that's all land, of course. And we could not have been in the air more than 60 seconds when suddenly the pilot comes over the intercom and says, "I want all my passengers to listen carefully. We are making an unplanned, unscheduled stop in Mogadishu." And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be good. Plus now everybody's going to say I'm a big fat liar. And he continues and he says, if you are going to be a departing passenger, I want you to do so quickly when we land. If you're not a departing passenger and going on, do not stand in a doorway making yourself a target. I said, oh, this is going to be good. Well, as we were coming in, you could see the ground fire even before we got there. So, I mean, this is total land, but suddenly I noticed a plane is swinging out over the water so that we can come in for a landing. I shouldn't laugh because it is sad and it was dangerous, but I never saw people get off of a plane so fast in my life. When that last person, their foot hit the asphalt of the runway, that plane was circling around and off we went and got out of there. I'll just add one more little thing to Libya. I told you 2 things about it already. One of the things I used to joke with, fool around with a bit with my students was I'm very proud of my Irish-American heritage. And I would tell them more in a teasing thing that, hey, Rufus can talk his way out of anything, Rufus can talk his way into anything, and that's only half true, by the way. But I do have that Irish gift of gab, and I think tonight I can prove it to everybody in this room. Because when I finally did get into Libya just about 1.5 years ago, my visa application to get into the country said that I was a Chinese engineer. Now you're looking at me, and I no more look Chinese, I look like an Ethiopian, but I kept talking, and they finally let me in. So I was able to seal the deal there with Libya. In the foreword to my book, Longitude and Latitude with Attitude, I deliberately made it short because I know most people skip reading a foreword in a book or whatever, and I thought it was important if you did read the book, because it's a little different kind of book, to know something about the person. And one of the things that I wanted to do in that preface or foreword was to explain what in the heck ever gave me the audacity to think I could go to every single country in the world. When I look back now, I must have been nuts, because it's still an awesome thing to try to do. It was harder then, but it's still very difficult if you were to try to do it. And there were 3 things that I list in there that probably put me where I am at today to do such a thing. Number 1. My first social studies class that I ever had in my life was in 5th grade at St. Leonard's Elementary School on 9 Mile Road over in Warren. And I'll never forget this to the day I die, I think, because I've remembered it all this time, is that when we walked into that social studies class, instead of having a nun, which was so usual back in the day, we had a lay teacher there. She handed out our books. I remember that book to this day with its orange cover on it. Let me digress for a minute on orange cover. There's probably some Protestants sitting out here or people who didn't go to Catholic school. I feel sorry for you poor Protestants because you only have 10 commandments. If you were any of us Catholics that went to Catholic school, you would know that we Catholics have an 11th commandment that says, make sure you have a cover on that book directly from God to Moses. Those books that we had in Catholic school, in all of them, but especially at St. Leonard's on 9 Mile Road, were so old and so ancient. My theory then and now was that Jesus wrote them, gave them to the saints and the apostles, and they kept working their way down the 9 Mile Road over at St. Leonard's there, and we eventually ended up with them. But anyway, we were told, because it already had a cover on it, I'm not sure it was one of the tribes of Israel or whatever, but anyway, we had a cover on it. There was no homework, and we didn't have to take the book home. Well, there's not a doubt in my mind, even after all these years, I was the only nerd that took that book home that night. Now, I don't want to overly impress you, like I was some scholar and read the whole thing from cover. No way, I wasn't that good. My teachers would back me up on that one. But what I did do, in the south end of Warren, in an attic bedroom, that night I flipped through that book, mostly looking at the pictures and the captions underneath, and the first one I came to was the pyramids in Egypt. And here I am in 5th grade, about 10, 11 years old. I don't know where this came from, but immediately when I saw that, I said to myself, somehow, some way, I'm going to do that. Now, you got to remember, at my age, I'm 70, that back in the day, especially in the south end of Warren, I did not know one human being who had traveled anywhere, including in this country. None of my teachers, none of my family, none of my friends. I mean, that was something like you saw in the movies or TV or whatever. Just, there was no mentors, nobody that I could, kind of copy after, if you would. So I flipped the pages, a few more, and there's the Great Wall of China. Well, I had to do that too. And then I keep going, and it's the Taj Mahal, and you see where this story is going, was that these were things that I wanted to see. 10, 11 years old, 5th grade, I didn't have a clue how I was going to do it, but the seed of thought was up there. Second thing that influenced me to do it. When I was 18, two of my buddies from St. Leonard's Elementary School, we're in high school now, we graduate, and we make the Great American Road Trip across the United States. We didn't have a clue what we're doing, made every stupid mistake you could make in traveling. That's how you learn. Came back sunburned, starving, poison ivy, the whole 9 yards, but had a blast. And it was my first really trip in how to travel. I just thought, I could use what I learned there and use that all over the world. Wrong on that. But anyway, that's the second thing that got me going to try to accomplish this. Third thing. The other two were good things. The other one, more negative, I guess. I put in a year with the 5th Marines in Vietnam. I seen many good guys get killed, wounded, and maimed for life. And even at a young age, when I would see that, I came up with the conclusion that, man, if you want to do something, you don't put it off. You don't talk about, I'll do it later, next year, and never when I'm retired or whatever. You grab the world and you try to do what you want to do. So I think those were the three things that propelled me to do this, trying to see the entire world. One of the things I do when I give these book talks is, not to be mean or anything, but is to head you off at the pass on some of the questions that I know that are going to come up. We will have a question and answer session afterwards. In fact, there's no particular time I got to be home, so if you want to talk, I'm more than willing to talk here. And after the question, I got some books back there if you want to buy them. Let me just share this about my book, if you do want to buy it. I try not to brag, but I'm the only author in America that gives you a money-back guarantee. Now, if you just knew how cheap I was, though, you would understand what that means. If you do give me $20 for that book and decide you want your money back, you'll have to chase me 4, 5, maybe 6 blocks, tackle me to the ground. I'll be holding on to my wallet, screaming and yelling for the police, but you will get a money-back guarantee on the book. So one of the questions that always comes up is, what was the worst thing that happened or the most dangerous thing that happened? You're probably thinking, I already heard it. No way. You haven't heard the worst one. That's coming up right now. In the early 1980s, I did my usual thing at the last day of school at Brownell Middle School, and that is, as I walked out to end the school year that year, I would go by the doorways of my colleagues and say goodbye, and then I would joke. I'd say, hey, if I'm not back in September, start the cookie sales, forget Save the Whale, Save Rufus, and call the State Department, because if I'm not back on time, it's not because I'm enjoying myself and I've extended my leave. I said, I'm in trouble, you need to do something for me. And, they would laugh and hope that wouldn't happen, of course. Well, this time it did. I got into Zimbabwe. I don't know how much you know about Zimbabwe, but Zimbabwe down in southern Africa had lived under white racist rule for over 100 years. The black Africans in that country revolted. They won the war. They took over their own country, but things were very, very tense there at that time when they took over. Just at that time, this is when Rufus comes swooping in. I had had a horrible flight in terms of just the logistics of getting there, so I had jet lag like you can't believe. It was Detroit, New York, all layovers, London, all the way down to the bottom of Africa. So I was in goo-goo land as far as jet lag or whatever. And I get in. I did have a hotel for a change instead of sleeping on a park bench. But I looked at my watch, and oh my God, it's like, 3 or 4 o'clock. And I said, if I go to bed and get 8 hours sleep now, it's going to throw the whole trip off. What I got to do is I got to stay awake, maybe go to bed early, but go to bed at night, not at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And I probably could have sat in my room or in the lobby, but I knew if I sat down, I'd nod out and I'd go to sleep. So I said, you know what? If I just keep moving, that's what I got to do. I just keep moving. I'm not going to fall asleep on my feet. And that was my plan. So I'm wandering all around the capital city of Harare. I don't know where I'm going. I don't care. And suddenly, I go into a kind of an upscale area like Grosse, Pointe, Bloomfield Hills or whatever, really nice homes and whatever, which is a lot different than the average schmuck lives in most areas of Africa. And I see some soldiers out in front of a house, and I figure, well, it must be the Prime Minister's house. And I'm wondering to myself, hey, I wonder if they run tours of the presidential house like they used to do with the White House, which they don't do anymore. So I innocently cross the street, and I walk over this group of soldiers, innocently ask, is this the Prime Minister's house? Well, that was a wrong question to ask, and I also asked it of the wrong soldier. The minute he turned on me and looked at the snarl on his face and the way he talked to me, this was the wrong character to be talking to, and I knew that instantly. Now, I'm not stupid enough to turn around and start running, because that's just, going to get me in trouble or whatever, but I'm already trying to make a gracious exit as well as I can with that Irish gift of gab with my lips flapping a mile a minute, just trying to move away from it, and I don't get too far before I have 6 bayonets right against my head here, and things are now moving very quickly. The next thing I know, they call the police. I'm put in handcuffs. That was a new one for me. I've never been in handcuffs before. I lived a good life here, but never been in handcuffs. And I am taken not to a jail. I'm taken to the central prison, the biggest, baddest prison that they've got in Zimbabwe. I still don't have a clue what the heck's going on, what I did wrong, whatever. I don't know. I'm in a small room, solitary confinement, and I don't have an idea what's going on. And the worst part is I'm traveling by myself. There is no such thing as internet, laptops. That hasn't been invented yet or whatever. And my family and everybody's just used not to hearing from me until I show back up in September. This is like in early or middle June. So I'm standing in there when suddenly the door barges open, and about, 13, 15, 18, I lose track now, it doesn't matter. Black CIO agents, Central Intelligence Organization agents, come walk in. They're all in suits. They all make sure that their suit coat's open so I can see they got a revolver. I got a Swiss Army knife, so that's not looking real good. And they surround me. I don't like that either. I don't like having, in a circle with people behind me and get easily hit on the head that way or whatever. And things very quickly start heading south. Here's the first question that they asked me. Why did you blow up the Air Force of Zimbabwe? Well, that question caught me off guard so much that even that famous Irish gift of gab I've been bragging about failed me. It was like, I didn't even know what to say or do. And as this interrogation keeps going on and on, it's not getting any better. This Irish gift of gab I keep bragging about, boy, it failed me big time here. It's taken me nowhere. If anything, things are not looking good. And what I'm most fearful of is that, I hate to say it happens in this country, so you can only imagine a third world country. They just want to nail a crime on somebody so that the district attorney and the police all look good, they got their man or whatever, and I'm going to be taken out in some yard and shot or whatever. I'm the guy that blew up their Air Force. So things continue to not go so well when one of the agents, now some of them are screaming at me, and he's screaming at me this and that, questions mostly, and he says, what is your profession? And I said, well, I'm a teacher. And then he screams at me, prove it. It's like, okay, how do I, standing here, how do I prove a teacher? Got a blackboard? I could write on it or something, like how do you do that or whatever? And then I remembered. Now, this part of the story is very embarrassing to me because it demonstrates what a cheapskate I am. I said, okay, I can prove I'm a teacher because I had my Brownell Middle School ID card on me. Now, you're probably wondering, what is a grown man doing with a middle school ID card? Well, I learned very quickly in my travels, got it right here, that you could get discounts at museums and castles and palaces, and I am traveling on a budget. I'm on a teacher's salary, and I take it out, and I show it to them, and oh my God, that changed the whole tenor of things immediately. You have no idea how Africans and Asians both respect education and educators. And now just the whole atmosphere changes completely. Now they're talking to me very nicely. They're all calling me professor. I kept telling them, I said, I don't have a PhD. They kept calling me professor. Call me whatever you want if I can just get out of here. And I was really, can we get you a glass of water, which had not been offered? Can we get you a Coca-Cola, which was a real stretch on their, the funds that they had and so forth. So I got out of that deal on that one over my Brownell Middle School ID card on that. I do have a little postscript trying to demonstrate my humor, I guess, to that story that mostly is bad, except I got released. And that little chapter is called How I Was Stalked, attacked and eaten by a leopard. So as you can clearly see, some of my titles are a little exaggerated, especially on the last part about being eaten or whatever, but most of that, at least the first two, was true. When I wrote this book, my editor was actually my neighbor right across the street from me in Grosse Pointe. Since then, he's moved to Cape Cod, Massachusetts, still works as my editor. So on the first book, I literally sent him everything that I had ever written. He went through it and edited it and helped me with it and so forth. He put the chapters in order and with my permission, which chapters would go in, because I had more than enough for a book. In fact, I got 3 more books coming out. At the rate he's working now, I don't want to cut him down. He's basically working for free, but you and I will need another lifetime before they all get out here or whatever. But anyway, he emailed me. By that time he was in Massachusetts, and he said, here's the chapters I think that should go in and in the order. And I looked at it, and I had a problem. And as if you haven't figured out already, I think I'm a big comedian and clown and whatever, think I'm very, very funny and whatever. All my stories in there were travel stories with what I think is my great sense of humor, except he had 2 from Vietnam. So I emailed him back, and I said, Anthony, let's yank those 2 Vietnam stories. Not that they were graphic or murderous or anything like that. It wasn't all blood and guts or anything like that. They were strange. But I said, let's yank those 2 Vietnam chapters. And, we got plenty of other stuff, put those in there. He emails me back. He said, no. He said, those 2 chapters are not graphic. It's not going to really bother anybody or anything. They know you're alive and whatever. It does a lot to explain you and what you do in that book. I'm still not buying it. So I go, it's getting late that night. I go upstairs to go to bed, and I'm talking to my wife, Monica, and I said, I'm arguing with Anthony, via email. I said, I want to yank those 2 chapters on Vietnam, and he's kind of giving me some pushback or whatever on it, looking for her, for some support and whatever. She says, well, I agree with Anthony. I think they should go in there. That traitor, I married her to back me up, but anyway. So, you know what, it was 2 versus 1, and, I respected both people. So I did it, and I'm so glad I did, because when people read the book, the 3 chapters that they say most moved them and they got the most out of were the first 2 on Vietnam and the one I'm going to talk about right now that has moved me the most. It's called Getting Eric. It's when my wife and I, 22 years ago, went to Russia to adopt a little baby boy. My favorite chapter by far, and what a wild story it turned to. At first, when you hear about it, you think it's just going to be some sentimental, mawkish thing. No way. We had more adventures and misadventures on that than you could shake a stick at. So here's what's happening. I didn't get married till I was 44. Got married late. And my wife, like most women, wanted to have kids. And it wasn't happening. And I'm not getting any younger then either. And so we finally decide we're going to adopt. Many of you, because I'm looking around here, you appear to be my age, know that with the fall of the Soviet Union and communism, we started seeing on the news, especially TV, all those orphanages over in Romania and Russia. It was enough to break a grown man's heart, the way those children, those babies were being mistreated, not treated, and the horrible conditions that they were in. So we were looking to adopt a baby somewhere out of Eastern Europe. So ordinarily, you got to wait about 1.5 years or 2 years. But again, with my age starting to factor in, the adoption agency saw that Russia, where we were now kind of zeroing in on, was in Parliament was going to change their adoption laws. And they were afraid one of the things they might tweak would be the age thing, and then I would age out, and we were screwed. So what they expedited everything, and the next thing we know, we get a notice from the adoption agency. Could we be in Saratov, Russia, in 48 hours to adopt a little baby boy 6 months old? And we immediately said yes on that. And all kinds of good people, my fellow Americans, really helped us out in that. My longtime travel agent, Margaret Harms at Great Waste Travel in Grosse Pointe, I called her up instantly. I said, man, I need tickets, and right now, I'll do whatever I got to do, pay what I got to do. We got to get to Saratov, Russia, which I'm embarrassed to say, even though teaching social studies, I never heard of the city before. Okay, it's a big industrial city in the heart of Russia. Margaret drives over to the travel agency on Saturday, the day it's closed, on her own time, cuts the tickets, and hand delivers them to our door. Okay, that was the first thing. Now, my wife, Monica, she had been what do you call it, a paralegal at Comerica Bank. And when she saw all the paperwork and everything we had to do in the logistics of what we had to do in 48 hours to get to Russia, she came up with a very wise decision that in all these duties and things that we had to do, anything that took common sense and brains, she would do it, and everything else would be left to me. So the first job in that order was that we needed, now get ready for this, to adopt this baby. They're not cheap. It's $20,000 plus whatever expenses we're going to incur when we're over there. So they said $20,000. I figured, well, maybe $2,000 for the 10 to 14 days that we're going to be over there. Now the hard part comes up. When you have a failed state and a failed economy like all those communist countries went through when communism fell, Poland and other countries, but Russia, when you have a failed state, you have a failed economy, and the economy works this way. They don't want their own money. In Russia, nobody wanted rubles, okay? They're not set up to take credit cards or traveler's checks. That means the only thing they want is hard, cold cash. What's the best currency around? I think we got it right here. They want hard, cold U.S. American dollars. It's still the easy part. The hard part is, for this adoption, because we're talking a lot of money here, they only want it in brand new $100 bills that are no older than 3 years old with the date printed on them. Now, this is going to get tough. To be honest with you, two things. Number one, I didn't even know what a $100 bill looked like. I'm more used to dealing with Washington and Lincoln and maybe Andy Jackson now and then. I didn't know what a $100 bill looked like. And secondly, even on those cheap ones that I've got a lot of, I had never bothered. I had to look around to find the date on it. And surprise, surprise, when I pull my wallet out, even though I didn't have any hundreds, I don't have anything in there that looks new. And most of the stuff we got looks like it's been around since those textbooks I had at St. Leonard's or whatever. Okay, so I hop into the car. I go to my credit union. I withdraw $22,000, and I said, there's a caveat on this. I need as many 100 brand new $100 bills that you've got here. Well, my credit union just didn't have that. They gave me what they had. So I hop in that car, and I swear I made a tour of Macomb and Wayne County of every bank and credit union I could find going in. And you know how that is when you go into a bank that you don't have an account at. It's the first thing they usually ask you. But when they found out what the story was, it was like, forget whether you have an account here. These people were going to help me, okay? And what you would have seen if you'd been the fly on the wall was the teller and Rufus holding these $100 bills up, seeing if they're good enough and young enough, I guess is the term we'd want to use. In other words, no more than 3 years old. And I don't even know now, I can't remember how many banks it was. I end up with $22,000 in hard, cold cash, brand new $100 bills to now be, it's about 24 hours to be over in Saratov, Russia, to get a little baby, 6-month-old baby boy. So we fly over there and we get there. And you know what? Even though I've traveled all over the world, I don't like traveling with $22,000 in cash. I don't want to be in Rochester with $22,000 in cash, okay? And so I'm a little uneasy about this. I mean, I got money in my money belt around my neck. I've got it in my underwear. I got it in both shoes. I mean, I got money all over the place. I'm Mr. Money, okay? This is the thing I really love in life, my money. I've worked hard for that. So we get over there, and we arrive in Saratov. Well, Russia was on its knees at that time. And we get off the plane. Sure enough, it's going to be dark. We're walking through this dark, dilapidated airport. Now I got my wife with me. Now, no offense to my wife or anything, but that causes me a problem. In all my travels, and I've been in a couple tight situations when I've traveled or whatever, I can fight, but I can run too. Whatever one's going to work, I got no problem running if the run is going to work. But I can do either one. But I got a little different problem now. I certainly can't run and leave my wife behind. And even the fighting could be dangerous if then they decide to take it on her. So now I got $22,000 in cash, and I got a woman with me, my wife. And we're walking through this dark, dank airport that I don't think there was a window left in it that wasn't broken. And we keep walking, and there are no signs or anything. We just keep following the crowds like dummies. And we keep going and going, and the crowd keeps thinning out. I'm expecting, like you see at the airport, somebody holding up a sign, Rufus McGaugh, the McGaugh family, whatever, the name of the adoption name. We don't see anything like that. I'm starting to get a little nervous. Lining the hallways as you walk, for lack of a better term, look like a bunch of drunken derelicts or whatever, but they all know in Russia at this time that the Japanese businessman, the American businessman, or the schmuck that's coming there to adopt a kid has got all cash, okay? And there's some big guys there or whatever, and I've, trying to take care of my wife too. So we keep walking, and pretty soon there's only like 5 or 6 of us, and they cut off to the left, and it's like, oh. And then suddenly this huge man presents himself in front of me. At first he says nothing. I hate to say it, not to be mean or anything, but he looked like a bum with the way he was dressed. I said, oh no, here it comes, man. This is going to be Fight City or whatever. And he walks up to us and he says, I'm Sasha. And that's not resonating with me because I don't know anything about Sasha, but then he adds, he's from the adoption agency. Okay, everything's good, so I think. So he says, well, let's go to the car. Well, from my years of traveling, I don't believe anybody or anything. And this guy doesn't really present himself real well to me. So I'm following Sasha, who's about 4 times bigger than me. And we keep going into more remote areas. And then he says, there's the car. Well, it's a huge parking lot like you'd see at an airport. Why is that car in the last row under a tree for even if you can have shade at nighttime? Why is it like that? So I'm a little nervous about this whole thing. And we walk and we get there, but we get in the car and nothing happens. The particular adoption agency that we dealt with, they had a policy to try to save you a little money because it's so expensive, is that you would stay in a Russian citizen's home to save a little money. So we get to the apartment. All of us who, had social studies in middle school, high school, remember we were taught during communism how bad the housing conditions were for the Russian people with their cramped apartments with everything falling apart. Your teacher didn't lie to you, okay? They're that bad or worse, okay? In fact, when we get to the apartment that we're going to be staying at, the Russian woman we stay at, her name was Laura, the living room was so small that she was in there with a little love seat. That was it, a love seat, no other furniture. And Sasha goes in, well, there's no room for Rufus now. That's all that room's got to hold is Laura, my wife, and Sasha. In fact, they had some questions for me the next day. Sasha had to go out in the hallway, and Rufus has to go on the inside. So it was pretty bad conditions that we're going to be staying in. So everything seems to be going okay now. But day after day, my wife and I are being taken around either together or separate, signing papers with the federal government, the province, the Russian government, the Soviet government, everything you can think of, the adoption agencies or whatever. My wife, like many women, her whole goal, she wants a child. She wants a baby. And this is all a bunch of baloney. But we keep going through it. We know what we've got to do. So finally, my wife starts pestering. When do we get the baby? And I said, it's coming, it's coming. So one day, Sasha shows up. And he says, he comes in, and he's got another guy with him that's bigger than him. This man is huge. And I'm going like, who's this guy or whatever? And he says, do you happen to have $20,000 on you, U.S. money? Well, I do happen to have it, but why do you want to know? But he says, we will make arrangements for the baby today. Well, my wife hears baby. She's okay. I don't hear anything about getting a baby. I hear about making arrangements to get a baby, and we're talking my money. So anyway, we go down. I don't know if you're very familiar with those old Russian cars we used to laugh at, the Lada. The little Russian Lada kind of looks like a mix between a Yugo and a Gremlin, except not so nice or whatever. They're a little tiny. We used to laugh. It looked like a pregnant roller skate. It had a rubber band for a motor and all. Well, this is what we get into. We get into a Lada. How the 2 Sashas ever got in there, I don't know. I mean, the bigger of the 2 Sashas, literally like a football linebacker, had to back up and charge in there to get himself in. He got in, the other Sasha's in. These guys are so big that Monica and I in the back seat can't even see out of the windshield. So at one point, Monica's a little curious too. Who is this other Sasha here, And so our original Sasha says, well, he's a bodyguard. What the hell do we need a bodyguard for? You'll find out in a moment. We pull up in Saratoga, a very big city like Detroit. It's an industrial city. But with the foot traffic, it looks more like the movies you see of New York City with tens of thousands of people walking around. And so we pull up there, and we're just sitting there doing nothing. It's getting a little awkward or whatever. And finally, my wife nudges me, and I go, Sasha, what are we doing? He says, well, we're waiting for the woman, official, to make arrangements for the baby. I said, okay. And I said, who is this woman? Are you ready? She does not like to give her name out. I'm supposed to give some woman who doesn't like to give her name out $20,000? And I said, well, when are we going to her office? This is her office, the Lada. Suddenly, this huge woman appears, walking towards us. Both Sashas get out. Both of them are like this, one on the front of the car, one on the back of the car, and oh my God, it was like Moses parting the seas. All the Russian people just move away. They think it's mafia or something. So they're there. This woman official comes. This is a scam to me. I'm trying to look for a street sign so I can tell the police where this scam took place at or whatever. My wife's in goo-goo land. All she wants is a baby. She doesn't care. Anyway, I'm sitting back there. It's like, come on, stand by me like you said in the wedding. Let's get out of here and go to the police or whatever. We could have done better in New York and bought the Brooklyn Bridge, probably cheaper than this scam that's going on or whatever. This woman comes, she can barely get into the car, and when she finally gets into the car, she turns as well as she can, and she looks at us. Are you ready for this? She says, I'm Sasha. I said, what the hell? Is everybody in this country named Sasha? And it's like I'm looking at my wife, let's get the hell out of here. When we do go to the police, what am I going to tell them when they say, who scammed you or stole your money? I'll go, well, there's Sasha and Sasha and Sasha. I might as well tell them it was the Three Stooges, for God's sakes, So anyway, Sasha relieves me of $18,000 in hard cold cash that's all over my body. And as she leaves, she says, tomorrow you get baby. And here's me. My wife, she's overjoyed. Me, I'm sitting there. We end up with a baby tomorrow, I'm a monkey's uncle. Well, I must be a monkey's uncle because the next day, spoiler alert, we go to the orphanage, and it only gets weirder and stranger. We get in there, it's just as horrible as we saw on TV. We read about it, it's horrible. Enough to make a grown man cry. These poor little infants and babies and little children with just horrible conditions. That orphanage looked like the Packard plant, except not so nice. So this is a horrible place. We go in there, and we're worried about a switch and bait, too. We had gotten a video of the baby. He's a cute little guy. And we were wondering if we were going to get that cute little guy or not. So, they keep separating us. They take my wife into the back at one point. She comes out crying because it's just so bad what these kids are going through. The clothing that they were in was one of the more bizarre things I'd ever seen in my life. It was not only scrap material, but it was like these long, skinny scraps that they hadn't really sewn well, just a stitch here, a stitch there, and they're walking around like in these robes or whatever. None of the strips matching each other. It looked like they had raided Belial Auditing Company or something to get the material. And these kids are walking around when suddenly they reunite us, and everybody's standing around, all the Russian nursery worker women and the head. And at one point, coming out of that back room again, a woman comes out with all of these scraps of cloth. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, they're going to give us extra clothing for the baby. And, I got a smart aleck sense of humor, but I know if I blow up, my wife will kill me. This marriage is dead. I want to say, we're not going to dress our kid like an Ethiopian refugee. We're going to dress him like an American. But I keep my mouth shut. And they put it over on a table, kind of like these tables here, but over here. And they're just standing there, and it's getting really awkward. And my wife kind of nudges me. So, I don't know, maybe I walk over. I said, I'll admire the clothing, like we're happy for it. And I walk over, and I look at it, and I smile. Yeah, this is nice rags, nice clothing or whatever. When all of a sudden, I see it move a little. And I look a little closer. Oh, my God, there's a baby in there. And it's little Eric, and he looks so goofy. Of course, now he'll look like his new goofy-looking dad, but at any rate, and then with all the rags he's got on, he dresses like me too. So anyway, there was our little guy. He literally jumped into my arms. We bonded immediately. He's 22 now. If you could see my son, I wish I could have brought him in tonight. He's a big kid. He's 22. He's much bigger than me. And I give credit to America, the love of dad, the love of mom, and his love of Kroger's got him to that side. That boy can eat. That's all there is to it. Well, I think we've gotten to the point here where I could probably take some questions or continue. Questions? Okay, yeah. So if you have some questions, I got to give you a warning now. I'm the only man in the world that will laugh at his own hearing loss and make a joke of it. When I was in Nam, besides the Viet Cong and the NVA trying to kill me, I had a Navy airstrike once that blew out my left eardrum, a Marine artillery strike once that blew out my right eardrum. So I joked that nobody liked me when I was over there. But at any rate, I will get closer to you. I'm not deaf, but I might have a hard time hearing. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them. Yeah.
Vietnam was the first country.
Yeah, that was my first country. What a loser.
Aside from Vietnam, probably Canada, what's the first country you visited?
Well, I actually write, I think it's in this book too. I write a little story about that. It was Vietnam was my first real country. In high school, I had made, an hour trip over to Windsor, so I guess I could say Canada. I don't think there's a Marine in the Marine Corps that hasn't gone to Tijuana, Mexico, and trust me, Tijuana is not Mexico or like the rest of Mexico. I was even counting things like Wake Island when we flew over, so it was the first real country. So the first real country that I saw and continued to get that appetite was the bad news caused by the war, but every soldier was guaranteed an R&R. I had listened to my fellow Marines of what the 5 or 6 places we were allowed to go to, and it seemed Bangkok, Thailand was a place to go. I chose that, so Thailand would have been the first real country that I got to and really saw something else.
For the service,
Oh, okay. Well, see, I went in, I had 2 years at Macomb Community College. So I was a little different than most of my fellow Marines that most of them hadn't even had their GED. But anyway, it's another story. So I had 2 more years of college to go. And then if you remember, this would have been the late 60s, early 70s. It seemed like everybody that got out of college made that trip over to Europe with their backpack, with their girlfriends, their buddies, or their friends. So we did that. That set my all-time record. 26 countries in 3 months. I would never equal that again for a whole bunch of different reasons. I'd probably never, even as a teacher, get 3 solid months off again. But Europe, some of you I know are travelers. Europe is so easy to travel, and a lot of the countries are so little, like Belgium and Netherlands and whatever. And the great rail system that they have, and you just keep knocking them off. And that actually was a little bit of bad news for me because I thought I could do the same thing when I got to Africa and Asia. This is in the 70s, and that was not going to happen, especially Africa. You better have a Jeep with 4-wheel drive and some guides and some people to help shovel you out and whatever on that. Any other question? Yeah.
What in your personality makes you cross a line, leaving safety, entering danger, in almost every country you went in, and you were pre-warned about several of them? What makes you do that? And then you leave those countries, you come back to the USA, and you keep doing it over and over.
My enemies would say just outright stupidity, but I'm going to give my own answer to that. It's my sense of adventure. Yeah, the whole thing, I just gave my friend David here a list of all the countries and lands and places I've been to, which is 258 now. It was never about a list. I mean, it was just one of the things I did. I mean, some people laugh at the list, but I say, most of us want to see all 50 states, and there's nothing funny keeping a list of that. It was just one way for me to see what I thought were the unique, the beautiful places of the world. Now, you caught something there, though. You're right. If you want to see everything, there's going to be some places that a normal person, I guess that leaves me out, would probably say, forget it, I don't have to see it all. But especially as I started getting closer and closer to sealing the deal, it was like, I'm going to do it. I think I can do it. Despite my joke that I'm not as dumb as I look, I do put some planning and some smarts into it.
All the injuries that you told us about.
Yeah, it kind of comes with the territory. One of them was a war, getting shot up. The other one in Cuba was a freak accident. And with a couple other minor exceptions, I haven't done too bad for all the stuff that I've done. Chuck?
Has National Geographic ever contacted you? Because, you work you live in a community where there are people who are of some celebrity and import, and
I did it in reverse. I contacted them, and they do have some of my photography on file with them. Much to my heartbreak, they haven't used it yet. May never will, for all I know. But I have sent them stuff. Always gotten a nice letter. I don't know if that ends up in the circular file or not. But they have a couple things I thought was unique. They seem to agree. They've got it on file, but of course, never good enough to get into the magazine, which would make my day.
No, but I've got a second one.
Okay, sure, yeah.
I worked in the same school with you.
Right.
And we were not in the same department. But your reputation and your relationship with that age teenagers was something to behold. Now, there were other people who were excellent, made excellent additions to the staff, and I was kind of belittled, you might say, I felt as though maybe I wasn't sufficient. to be on the staff there with all you guys, but you had the reputation that really clicks. The kids really relate to. Now, what did you do? Because they never called you Mister.
No, right. Yeah, they always went with the nickname, right.
All the kids almost reverently would call him Rufus.
Yeah.
And one time he came back he didn't come back on time after Easter vacation. He came back about a week and a half late, and I hope you tell us that story. But the kids and the staff and parents in the community were genuinely concerned. Every day we heard it because this treasure.
My wife doesn't talk about me that way, but anyway. In fact, Chuck, thank you so much. That was very kind of you to say that.
Yeah, but it's the truth. But, how did you, what do you...
Well, I'm going to give you that answer.
How do you relate that relationship?
See, you put it in a nice way. My wife, when she sees me playing with the boys when they were younger or whatever, says, now I know why you do so well at middle school. And I would shoot back, well, I know my audience, and there you go with it. Yeah, it was just, like some guys are good at athletics or whatever. I just had that rapport with kids, and I took it and I ran with it, and it just worked real well for me. A lot of it is silly, but that's what comes with the age group. I wasn't afraid to do it. But thanks for the fine compliments. Yeah.
I've been in China myself. What did you think of China and the people there?
Well, I got a couple interesting things. That typical gift of gab, Irish gab there. I can't give you one answer. I got to give you a dozen. But, I was one of the first Americans to get into China in 1979, 6 months after recognition by former President Jimmy Carter. So I got to go into China. I went through Wayne State University. They got a university group that got to go in. I was part of it. So I got to go in. Mao was dead, but it was still Maoist China, if you get my drift. Things hadn't changed just because he had kicked the bucket. And then I've had the opportunity to go back to China 4 or 5 times since then. China's a country very much like the United States. It's a huge country. It's a big country. And don't ever make the stupid mistake that, it's like saying all Americans are alike. To say all the Chinese are alike or all the regions are alike. So again, what I tried to do was to push the limits a bit. My second trip, I went to, just mainland China, if you would, because it's so big and so much. But, on the first trip, because it was such a unique trip and so close to recognition, if you can believe this or not, we didn't get to see the Great Wall of China. And it's like going to France without seeing Paris or, whatever, I could, go to Rome and don't see the Vatican or whatever. Like, what kind of trip is it? But anyway, so that was one of the reasons I went back to mainland China. And then, if I can remember the story, the third trip was Tibet. Now, of course, Tibet is as different from the rest of China as you could get. And then probably the most unique one that I made was, and most people think I've been drinking too much of my Irish whiskey when I say this, but I went to way out into the Northwest and went to what they call the Chinese Muslims, the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province there. That is an amazing place. It's desert, which kind of defies when you kind of like stereotype China of rice paddies and cities and whatever. So this is desert. They're Muslim. They are more traditional and more conservative than the women even in Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan. We're all familiar with the burqa, like in Afghanistan, where at least they got the little slits they look through. With the Uyghurs, it's a solid piece. They can see out, but it's a solid piece of cloth. There's no cuts, holes in it or whatsoever. So you almost have to keep pinching yourself that you are in China, at least the country of it, with the Uyghurs. I'll come back to you in 1 minute. Let me get him, and I'll come to you, Chuck.
When you were in Zimbabwe, how long were you actually in that prison, and what did you do with it?
The whole thing from beginning to end seemed like about 25 years, but it was probably less than 24 hours. The whole thing. I got arrested late that afternoon. I was there the rest of the afternoon that evening and got released early the next morning. But it seemed like a lot longer, even for a guy that thinks he's got nerves of steel. Chuck?
I don't want to leave here without hearing the story about Copper Canyon.
Okay, well, the story is alluding to, and the only thing he had off on it was I only missed one day. It was the only day of school I missed. It wasn't quite as long. But I'm glad to see they were worried sick over me, even over one day. What I used to do, I didn't have money to be an international travel all 3 vacations. So what I was doing for many years is I'm an avid backpacker and mountaineer and mountain trucker. what I would do is I had a couple friends in Chicago, and every year we'd pick some remote spot, usually in Utah, but it could be Arizona or anywhere, southwest Easter time where it'd be, not freezing like here. Anyway, this year, for whatever reason, we chose Copper Canyon, Mexico, which most people don't realize is 2.5 times deeper than our American Grand Canyon. And so our guide didn't show up. This is a bad canyon to be going in by yourself. So we hired a local guy who turned out didn't know jack diddly. And again, funny for you guys, but actually this is one that was not so funny for me. We get in there, and within 2 days we're lost. The guide's lost. We're lost. We kept, and the reason we got lost, usually if you go in a canyon, all you got to do is turn around and go back the other way. We kept taking side canyons. We lost track of where in the hell we were at or whatever. I'll never forget this, if I can remember the order now, when after about 3 or 4 days, we'd run out of food, except me. I always brought a lot of extra, but I'm sharing it, so now I'm starting to run out. The guide that's going to lead us, starts crying and sobbing at the campfire saying, I'll never see my wife and children again. Just what you want your guide to do, So we try to shore him up. It's like, this guy still knows more than we do about this canyon, So the next night gets worse. Is we ask him, well, what should we do? What's the best plan? We just keep going deeper and deeper and further. This doesn't seem to be working out. Maybe we need another plan. His plan was that we get on our knees and pray to God and make our death as quick and as fast and as merciful as he could. I was ready to kill this guy. This guy's an idiot. It's like, I do not want to hear this. I'm a survivalist, even if it's bad. I want to think of some way to get out of here.
2 questions. How many trips did it take for you to do all of the continent of Africa? And what did you do? Did you get medical treatment in Cuba? Or did you wait until you got?
I wait till I got home. I'll answer one at a time, and if I forget, you can re-jog my memory here. I'm going to go with a number that it might not be precise for Africa. Took me a lot of trips. I'm going to say about 26 trips to do all of Africa. It's not like Europe. Sometimes I could only knock off 1 or 2 at a time, and that would be it. It would, with the visa problem and whatever, then I would continue maybe in Europe traveling, but I could only get 2 done, like a year. And again, don't hold my feet to the fire on that. That's just a rough guess, but I think it's pretty close, 26. And Cuba. Well, here's what happened. I evidently have a good threshold for pain. Now, a lot of people mistake that for I like pain, or I don't feel pain. No, I feel it just as much as you, but I, don't whine and cry about it or whatever. I just keep moving forward. So here's what happened. This actually makes for a better story. Glad you asked it. I broke both arms, had a concussion, broke a finger, got up, finished a bike ride, and I thought I had dodged a bullet. I didn't think I broke anything. I was sore and I was hurting, but I didn't think I broke anything. I'm feeling around. I'm no doctor or anything, but I thought it was okay. I knew it was going to be more painful as the days went on, but I thought I had dodged the bullet. So I did my own medicating with Cuban crystal beer at lunch. Had a couple of those. That seemed to help. But here's where it gets worse. I had to, let's see, what was it now? It was a 3-hour drive back to Havana with 2 broken arms. We had a 4-hour walking tour of Havana. Okay, I'm still thinking I dodged a bullet. We got about 3 or 4 hours sleep, and then because, don't tell anybody, I did it illegally, and I had 2 passports. I'd gone through Mexico. So with all the layovers and the different flights, it's going to take me 23 hours to get home with 2 broken arms. Okay. So the last flight, which is the shortest, Chicago to Detroit, I don't know, about an hour or less. I'm sitting next to a guy who turned out to be a doctor from the University of Michigan. He had just gone to a medical conference to Turkey, and it was his first foreign trip, and oh my God, his eyes were glazing over. He's telling me all about his trip to Turkey. And, he told me all about it and everything. Well, I thought I'd return the compliment and tell him about my wonderful trip to Cuba. But when I get to the part about the accident and tell him about slamming down, he's winching every time, and he goes, when you get into Detroit, you need to get medical assistance or get to an emergency room. Here's me. Nah, I'm okay. I said, look, I can do this, and I can do that. He was a real mild-spoken man. He says, I don't give a damn what you could do. My medical opinion is you've got some broken bones. He says, look at that elbow. It's the size of a cantaloupe. Well, he was kind of right about that, and I couldn't get it into my winter jacket. And I said, I think it's just swollen. I mean, this is why people say that I'm not as dumb as I look. I really am as dumb as I look, but anyway. So I get home, got home really late. It's like 2, 3 in the morning. I don't want to wake the family up. I got a million things to do. I've been gone like 10, 11, 12 days. I get in the house, I get the keys, and this was my first little inkling that it wasn't just swollen. Trying to drive a car with 2 broken arms to Beaumont Hospital, which is only a few blocks away from me. So I get into the emergency room, and I tell the doctors, look, I'm in a hurry. Just what they want to hear. And I said, I had this bike accident, but I said, I just think I'm bruised. And I said, here, feel around. I want this a short trip. I got a million things to do. I've been gone 10 days. Feel around, tell me I'm okay, I'm out of here. He says, no. We're going to go to radiology. We're going to let them determine it, No. So they send me into radiology, and they do all the x-rays. They put me back in the room. When that doctor walked in, he's almost like ticked off and angry at me. He's going, Mr. McGaugh, you're saying there's nothing wrong. He says, you got broken bones all over your body, So good news, bad news now. I'll continue the story just for a moment. My wife had just gotten an important doctor appointment for our youngest. She had waited 4 months for it. She said, I am sorry, but I cannot take care of you right now. I cannot drive you because you have to go to an orthopedic with broken bones. I can't do it. I got to get him into this appointment. So I called my neighbor, who's my editor, Anthony. I said, I know nobody wants to do this, take you to the doctor. I said, I got to get to a doctor, because I got broken bones all over me. So he gets me to the orthopedic. And this is the only good news is this horrible story you've heard all day today. I get in there. Well, from emergency, I had a full cast up to here in a sling, and I had a splint, same thing where I could only move like the ends of my fingers in a sling, okay? And I had a trip coming up to Africa in 2 months, and I'm telling my wife I'm still going to do it. She calls a buddy of mine over to try to talk me out of it, and his way of trying to talk me out of it was he says, you get over to Africa, and there's some pickpockets. Who should we pickpocket? How about the guy in the 2 slings? Ooh, Bob, you're probably right on that one. But anyway, I get into the orthopedic, and he does all the x-rays and looks at all the stuff and everything. He says, well, you know what? That broken arm, it's a clean break. You broke the elbow, and that humerus is severed. But you know what? If I can trust you not to be an idiot and do something stupid or whatever, we're learning that if you stay in that cast for whatever it is, 4, 6, 8 weeks, you're going to be doing rehab for 2 years. He said, we're learning that, just take it out, don't do any weightlifting or anything, don't get on a bike. I can get you out of that cast. You want to do that? I'm all in, man. Get me out of it. Because I'm like this. So he gets me out of that. And then he looks at the broken wrist, and he said, same thing, there's no chips. It's a nice, clean, break. I'll take you out of that splint. Again, don't, weightlifting, riding a bike, anything, lifting heavy stuff. Takes me out of that. Hey, I'm good to go. I come walking out there, and Anthony's waiting for me. I thought you had all these broken bones. I still got them, but I was okay. So all's well that ends well. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you, in any of your travels, did you have any extended sea voyages to any of the island countries or any time?
No, I was a bush marine. I spent my whole time, the first 4 months in the rice paddies and the villages, and the rest of my tour of duty up in the Quezon Mountains out in the jungles there. So I didn't see jack diddly squat when I was over in Vietnam, except the worst of what they had to offer. Anything else? Yeah.
What resources do you use when you're going to go to a different country? What resources do you use to research?
Well, I do a lot of reading. That's the first thing. So I know where I want to go. I try to figure out what there is to see. Then I work very close. I don't do all my own stuff. That's not my thing. Making my flights and all that. I don't like doing that. I'd rather have my wife do it for me or pay somebody to do it. But anyway, I work closely with a travel agent. She'll work on the flights and then work on some of the arrangements. And then in the old days, I was more on my own once I got there, okay? More and more now, I don't know if I'm getting old, lazy, or both, or whatever. More and more now, sometimes I have hotels waiting for me and things like that, making it a little easier where I can move around. I am not adverse to using anything to get to where I want to go. I'll do it Indiana Jones style. I'll do it with a backpack climbing a mountain. I'll go with a group tour. I'll do a cruise. I've done everything to get the deal done. Yeah.
This is probably a silly question, but I would like to know, you keep referring to the boys.
I got two. Oh, yeah. Well, that's a little story in itself. Eric gets his chapter, and what I had to do, I had to write a short little one on our youngest because I didn't want him to feel left out on it. Here's what happened. We adopted Eric 22 years ago. I was definitely too old then to, I felt I could adopt, but, no adoption agency would do it. So my wife, the eternal liberal, felt we still had something in us to give, and she said, let's go into foster care. Fine, we'll go into foster care, I don't care. We'll help kids out or whatever. When you go to foster care to become a foster care parent, they tell you in all 50 states now, the ultimate goal is to reunite, no matter how bad that family is, what low life they are, is to reunite that kid with the family. And they keep telling you, if you're here to adopt, it ain't going to happen. We'll give you names of adoption agencies, but you're not adopting any of these kids we're going to put into foster care. That's what they told us over and over, every meeting. You have to go through these classes. Fine, we'll do foster care, and, that's the way it'll be. Well, we got little JT, Jason. He was 3 years old, came from a horrible environment of drugs and violence and whatever, and he came to us, and the mother just couldn't get off drugs, and it was going bad, and it was looking like the state was going to, separate them two, for him to be in some sort of orphanage or whatever. So she cut a deal. She had met my wife because once a month there was a trade-off at social services of 1 hour she got with the child. So she had met my wife, and they would talk, and I don't want to say built up a relationship, but, they had talked. So the deal she cut, and one time my wife was in the hospital, I had to do it, so she had met me once. So she cut a deal with the state. She says, I'll give them up for adoption, but only to these two people. And so we did that. By then he was calling us mom and dad anyway, so I'm not going to put a kid into an orphanage, call me dad. And we still allow them to see each other, even though the state didn't want us to do it. I disregard that part of the state. I often don't think I know better than everybody else, but I didn't think that was the right thing to do. We get together for pizza or Christmas or whatever, and do stuff like that. So he's cool with that. I try to put a positive spin on it. You got two moms instead of one. Most of us only get one. You got two. And she, she's a very flawed individual. If you met her, you wouldn't hate her or anything. Just a very flawed individual that can't take care of her child. So, yeah, so we got the second one. He's 15 now, a sophomore at South. And if he minds his P's and Q's, I might let him live to get through senior year. Yeah.
So why exactly were you going through border control as a Chinese engineer?
Say that again?
Why exactly were you going through border control as a Chinese engineer?
Well, that's the way it was written up. And Ehab Zaki of Spikerman Travel, I don't want to say it was a scam, but he had some connection with a Chinese company. He had connections. He's an Egyptian American. He put those all together, and this was the way I was to get in, was as a Chinese engineer. The stationery was from some engineering company that was doing work over there. I guess the Chinese are doing engineering work all over. And so anyway, that was how I was supposed to get in. It almost didn't work. I just kept flapping my gums with that Irish gift of gab and, sealed the deal by getting in. Anything else? Yeah.
Which country impressed you the most?
Which one?
Which country impressed you the most?
Well, you've just asked me really an impossible question. There's variations of that question. I'll try to answer it, though, of, what's the most beautiful country, which country to like the best, and all that sort of thing. Well, I'm not a religious person, but God has put so many beautiful, wondrous places on planet Earth. I would have to keep you here a couple days to tell you about all the wonderful and beautiful spots I've got. How do you rank the fjords of Norway over Switzerland, or Switzerland over the green fields of Ireland? We could go on with that all day and all night. So just off the top of my head, some of my favorites are anywhere in the Himalaya mountains, because I do mountain trekking and mountain climbing, but they are absolutely beautiful. I'm starting to learn more and more. Some of the islands like Madeira and the Azore Islands off the coast of Africa are absolutely stunning, as is the French island of Réunion. But I could keep you here a long, long time giving you answers on that. Okay, I hope I gave you a halfway decent answer. Yeah, in the back.
What's next?
I'm sorry?
What's next?
Well, actually, after I promised my wife, I kind of lived up to it. I told them, my family was very supportive of what I did, and they knew I was spending a disproportionate amount of family income on me doing my thing. But both boys and my wife were fairly supportive of it. And I told them all along, and I did more or less live up to it. I said, when I'm done, now it's all you. And these people have traveled with me, by the way. My wife has been to 66 countries, so it's not like I'm just leaving her home. My son, 22 years old, has been, I got the list up in my head here. He's been to 47 countries. So, they've traveled, 47 or 37. So the kids have traveled. But I said I turned over to them, and that's what they're doing. They're planning trips. Dummies that they are, though, they usually say, well, what do you think is a good place to go? And I pick some place I want to go, but anyway, they go with it. And but anyway, they're picking it out. My wife we're going to do a European cruise, which is not my thing. We're going to do that this summer. Not enough adventure, not enough places to get killed.
doesn't. And I want to tell you, I marvel at you going everywhere.
Okay.
I wanted to figure out a way to see the world when I was a young person. And I decided, how can I get everywhere that I want to go for free? I went to work for an airline. But I would be hard pressed if I did over 47.
Okay. Well, funny one here. I just got back from a trip about a month and a half ago, and I'll tell you why I did it. You'll probably get a good laugh out of it, is that Ihab Zaki, who got me into Libya, was offering a trip through the North Caucasus Mountains of Russia. This is the Muslim area, okay? Read that as another place where you might want to get killed, like Chechnya, Dagestan, or whatever. And here again, if my first nightmare was they were going to put me into the ground and a tombstone would say you've been to every country but Libya, my second nightmare was when I was an little old feeble man in the nursing home, one of the nurses or the aides would come up to me, we're so sick of listening to you about you've been to every country in the world and talking about all these stupid places you've gone and we never heard. We just heard there's this new country of Abkhazia. It's a brand new country. I bet you haven't been there. I'd be able to go, I've been there. So I called it my wannabe countries trip. We cut across, the betting is, if you're a traveler and in diplomacy or whatever, that the next newest country on planet Earth will probably be something like Dagestan, Chechnya, Abkhazia, one of those places. So I hit all 5 of them. We went from the Black Sea over to the Caspian Sea. So I got that one out of the way, and I don't have to worry about signing into that nursing home now on that. Anything else? Yeah.
Maybe it's no longer applicable, but during your pursuit here, was there any time that you felt that it would be a waste of time or resource to go to a country that you already visited before? Or alternatively, is there a place that you visited over and over again and that's...
Okay, on the last part, yes, I do go back occasionally for one reason or another. Switzerland is one of my favorite to go to, so if somebody else wants to travel and go somewhere, I'd gladly go along. I've been to England a few times. Russia and China, because they're such big countries, would do it. What was the first part of the question?
If you felt that would be a waste of time or resource to go back to a country that you already visited because you were trying to chase.
Oh, well, a lot of people will hit me with this. They'll go like when the old Yugoslavia broke up. Well, I've been in through some of those, Croatia and Serbia, and they say, well, that doesn't count. And I go like, you make your list, I'll make my list, It's just like if you change your name, you say, you don't know that guy. Yes, I do. I know this guy. So I always thought that was kind of silly that it doesn't count. In fact, I laugh about that, and I told it to my students at the time. It was one of my great travel scams. When the old Soviet Union broke up, remember they had 15 republics. Well, I'd been to about more than half of them. Boy, that night I ended up with 8 new places on my list. I'd never left the living room, I'd been to Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania and some of those places. And the same thing then later when the Yugoslavia broke up. I've been to Croatia and Serbia. The downside of that was, oh, damn, there's some I didn't do, I wish I just would have known when I was there, Sometimes I was maybe a few miles away or whatever, but I wish I would have done it. But so be it. Gave me an excuse to go back. Well, I'll take another question. Sure.
Do you remember any memory in Peru?
In Peru. Well, I've been to Peru twice. I'm writing about Peru in my second book coming out. Beautiful country, of course, Machu Picchu and so forth. Every time I go there, the country seems to be more prosperous and doing better, and always enjoy it when I go to Peru. So the highlight yourself as well as I do. Nothing's going to beat Machu Picchu in terms of the great Inca ruins that they have there. I guess I will probably end it at this point. I'll be in the back if you care to say adios or buy a book or whatever. But I would like to thank you for being a great audience. It's been a lot of fun doing it for you. Thank you very much.